Hello and welcome to the OxygenAddict Triathlon podcast. We're brought to you every week by our sponsors, precisionhydration.com. You can personalize your hydration strategy today with electrolytes in different strengths that match how you sweat. You can get 15% off your first order with the code OxygenAddict15. We're also brought to you by Athletic Greens. Athletic Greens Ultimate Daily is an all-in-one daily supplement with 75 vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and digestive enzymes. Listeners can get 20 free travel packs worth over £60 with your first purchase. You can just go to athleticgreens.com/OxygenAddict. All right, guys and girls, welcome to the show. How are you all doing today? We are living in strange times, aren't we? It's been an incredibly bonkers few days. Recording this very late on Tuesday night to get this out for you Wednesday morning. I'm going to be honest with you, I'm completely shelled. I've had my first day of homeschooling my 8-year-old today, and we've had an awesome day, but I feel very much like the NQT who arrives at school and puts all their energy into the first day, and you just know that they're going to be absolutely wrecked by the end of the first week. So we've been playing football, we did a bit of maths, a bit of English, we learnt about magnets, we went around down to the local, there's a pond behind the house, and we did a little bit of artwork and drawing, and I got to about 5 o'clock and I was ready to fall asleep on the sofa. It was like being a teacher again. And then I managed to get a little bit of help and managed to jump on Zwift for an hour. Did the OxygenAddict podcast Zwift Power Hour, which was fantastic. We had, I think, very close to 130 people on tonight. And I've got to be honest, I didn't feel much like doing it before we got started. But as soon as we got rolling, I was really glad that I'd done it. It felt really good to have a commitment that I'd made to have to be there and get on with it and get it done. Because the minute I started pedaling, I immediately felt better for it, and it was great to do that. We had a bit of a laugh with people over messaging as we were doing it. Some of us had a Discord group set up. If you've not used Discord, it's well worth checking out, actually. You can either do text chat or voice chat. It's a little bit like CB radio, actually, over your phone, and we can give each other a bit of abuse and a bit of encouragement in equal measure as we go along. So yeah, it was really good fun. Loads of names on there that I knew from the team and from the podcast listeners, loads of names equally that I didn't know. We had over 20 different countries on there as well represented, as well as from Great Britain. We had, let's see, where do we have? America, Canada, Mexico, Switzerland, Belgium, France, Spain, Luxembourg, Japan, Korea. So I can only assume you guys have heard about this through the podcast, so it's fantastic to get you on the ride. There's lots of good banter going backwards and forwards, and from a purely selfish point of view, it was great for me to have a commitment I had to keep to actually get on there and actually get on and do it. So yeah, it was really, really good for that purpose, and I hope the people who took part in it found the same thing as well. So we dialed back our ride today. Usually would have been hitting the FTP sessions, but we were hitting intervals at 8%. And I've got to say, it's a nice little number to be hitting, actually, 80% of FTP. I've always found that I can't substantially really tell the difference between hitting full on 100% and those 90% sweet spot efforts. That they feel very, very similar to me. However, dropping it back another 10% meant that I still knew that I was working, but it was much more manageable. And I've got to say, it was a really good ride to do on one of those nights when I wasn't 100% focused and really wanting to get on there and get it done. So yeah, that was really good. And I've put the recording of this show back as far as I could, really, partly, simply due to not having the time to do it till late at night, but also things have been moving so fast and changing so fast, almost on an hourly basis, not just in society, but in the triathlon world as well, that I felt as though if I had anything recorded in the can and ready to go early, who knew where we would be? And so it has proved. We've had the message from Prime Minister Johnson here in the UK to say to us, we're now to stay in our houses unless it's absolutely unavoidable, which is a massive psychological shock to the system, isn't it? And so I think everybody's busy dealing with that and coming to terms with that. And people's thoughts are maybe moving away from triathlon a little bit as they're just coming to terms with working out what that means for our everyday lives. Now, that being said, in the triathlon world, we've had notification from British Triathlon that all events are suspended until at least the end of June currently. Still no official word from Ironman. I know that we've had some good communications from Outlaw in the UK saying what their plans are. And I've got to say, hats off to them. And there were some other organisers as well that I'll talk about. But the Outlaw guys in particular, I think, have been really honest in putting out a really well-worded statement that said, look, it doesn't look like these events are going to go ahead. Specifically, at the time, they were talking about half Nottingham, half Bowood, and now it's going to be extended, obviously, to include half Nottingham, Holcombe as well. Sorry, my mind went blank there for a minute. But they were saying, look, there's things we've got to work out. We don't want to keep your money. We're going to find out a way to do the right thing. We've talked with Active. They don't think it's right that if you've signed up to a payment plan that the next payment gets taken. But currently there isn't a way around it, and we're trying to work it out. And so I think that form of honest communication is super important. Like I said, I know a lot of my athletes who are racing some of the 70.3s in the UK, certainly as I go to record right now, that might have changed by lunchtime tomorrow, who knows. There's not been as much forthcoming from them. I'm also going to give a shout out to, you'll remember a couple of years ago now, I did an ultra organised by a chap called Wayne Drinkwater, who's the guy behind UK Ultras or GB Ultras. And I don't know him very well, but I met him at the race and he seemed like a lovely chap. And there was a Facebook post on with him disinfecting by hand one of his race marquees, and he's donating all of his stuff to the NHS effort, t-shirts, medical supplies, generators, the use of his marquee, which I just think is fantastic. So there's really amazing things going on at a time when it'd be easy to be pretty down and pretty depressed. And on the subject of that, this is completely outside the realms of triathlon, but I think a lot of our listeners are the kind of people who see a little bit further than just the end of their aero bars. Here where I live, in a little village in Cheshire called Lymm, one of the local ladies set up a Facebook group and said, I think we should try and do something to make sure that everybody in the village is looked after. And so they've nominated, they've got volunteers, and they've got at least one volunteer on every street that's gone round and put a leaflet through everybody's door that just says, hello, my name is Rob. Here's my phone number. If you need anything, give us a ring. If you need medicine, if you need food, if you need someone to chat to, give us a ring. And if I can't do it, someone will sort it. And within a matter of 2 days here in this village, I think there's over 260 volunteers have volunteered for one road each. And I don't know whether, listeners, whether you're finding this as well, but people rang me, people texted me just to say, I don't know you, but thanks very much for doing this. This is brilliant. I've been talking to people in the street. I've lived in this house now for close to 2 years. I know the neighbours on either side of me, and there's people on the street who I pass on the way to school every day. Some of them, their kids go to my kids' school and we don't know each other than just to sort of smile and nod. People are stopping in the street and chatting, and it's really opened up this conversation to say, look, let's all look after each other. So if you've got something like that going on in your community, I would massively encourage you to get involved in it, because there's a lot of people feeling lonely and vulnerable. And I think most of us are youngish, strongish, fittish, certainly compared to the population. Even if it just involves going and getting a bit of food for some of the neighbours, or giving them someone to talk to on the phone for 5 minutes a day, we can do an awful lot of good in our societies at this time. And like I said, this isn't about triathlon, but there's a few more important things going on right now than what colour lycra suits we all run around in, aren't there? All right, now, back on the subject of triathlon, a couple of shout outs. I want to give mention to our sponsors who have continued sponsoring the show, continued supporting you guys with discounts and with good stuff that'll help you out. So first up, we're going to be doing a lot of training indoors, so make sure you get your electrolytes replenished. I'm always banging on about Precision Hydration. I think these guys are a fantastic company. They make a great product. If you're not sure what strength electrolytes you want, you'll do yourself no harm getting the strongest ones there. They've emailed me this week to say, good job with the show, keep on turning it out every week. We recognize that's not easy. Just to let you know, we're all working from home, but we've got the supply chain in place. Tell the listeners they can keep on ordering and we'll keep on delivering. So again, I don't think it's a problem to stockpile electrolytes at this time. So get your orders in, stash it up, get it in your cupboards, then you're not going to be getting any cramps when you're training on the turbo or the treadmill, okay? So that's one thing. Use the code OxygenAddict15 for 15% off your first order with those guys. And secondly, Athletic Greens jumped on board a few weeks back, and I've talked about their product a lot. I really, really like it. It's an all-in-one daily supplement made all from whole food sourced ingredients. There's over 75 vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and digestive enzymes. And I think if you're going to do anything to try and give yourself a bit of an edge with your immune system at this time, if you're taking extra vitamins and stuff, this is a great all-in-one supplement. It's a little scoop of green powder that you shake up with water. Tastes quite fruity, quite fragrant. It's not disgusting like some of the the green drinks that you try. I really liked it, and when I started taking it all the way back in January, I definitely felt as though I was getting a boost, both in terms of like not picking up any colds and sniffles and things like that earlier on in the year, which, I've been, what's the phrase? I've been a person who's caught a few of those in the past, and I didn't at all through the winter this year. So I'm sure if anything has helped, this has been part of it. For listeners of the show, if you go to athleticgreens.com/oxygenaddict, you get 20 free travel packs worth over 60 quid with your first purchase as well. Now, they've just sent an email through just before I went on air to say they've just signed up the following athletes as part of a Triathlon Ironman team. There's more details to come on this, but the following athletes are now sponsored and or / people who promote their product. So they've got Angela Nath, Ashley Gentle, Mirinda Carfrey, Laura Phillip, Imogen Simmons, Sebi Keenley, Josh Amberger, Tim O'Donnell, and Tim Don. All right, so these are guys and girls who know their stuff and are looking after their immune systems and looking after the digestive systems. Give it a try. It's great stuff. Okay, so that brings us to this week's interview of the week. I've had this in the can for a few weeks now, so it isn't really relevant to the situation that we find ourselves in with coronavirus and lockdown and all of that. But Dr. Andy Kirkland is a very interesting guy. He works up at the University of Stirling, lecturing on the sports science course up there. Very, very knowledgeable PhD in sports coaching. He's got a background working for British Cycling, and he's literally the guy who wrote the book. If any of you have done any of the British Cycling coach education courses, he wrote all the coach manuals for those, and they're really good. I've got copies of those ones, and I've been very impressed with how succinctly he manages to get the information down. He's also a triathlon coach. He's a coach that I helped train as part of one of the education courses, although frankly I had no place whatsoever teaching Andy anything. He's currently coaching Simone Mitchell, winner of Ironman Wales, so we get a little bit of chat on there, and he's just an all-round very interesting guy, so I thought it'd be a great person to get on and talk about some of the fundamentals of coaching, and I think you'll get a lot from this interview. So here we go. This week's interview of the week is with Dr. Andy Kirkland. Andy Kirkland, welcome to the OxygenAddict Triathlon podcast. How are you doing today, my friend?
Thanks very much, Rob. I'm good. Delighted to be here.
Good stuff. Well, listen, for listeners who don't know about you and who haven't heard about your background, we'll give you a little bit of an introduction. I think the easiest way into this is to describe how I met you originally. Originally, I met you as part of, you were one of the candidates on a level 2 triathlon coaching course a few years ago, and everybody was introducing themselves about the background, and it came to you, and all of a sudden, I was like, you've got a PhD in exercise physiology. What are you doing on the course that I'm tutoring? But one of the things I always found absolutely fascinating about you was you're like a pure academic who's interested in learning and who's interested in people and is interested in not just the science of coaching, but also in the science of people, what makes people tick, and how to get the best out of people, not necessarily through improving functional threshold power, but sometimes through just improving relationships with people. So I thought you would make a great expert witness to have on to talk about what makes excellence in coaching and what athletes can look for within their coaching relationships to really help them get the best out of themselves. So listen, let's kick off. Tell us a little bit about your background before you got involved in triathlon. You came into triathlon through the back door, really, didn't you, through your background in cycling and working with British Cycling?
Well, sort of, Rob. I would say the background's a wee bit different. I was, how to describe it, a bit of an underground clubber in my youth, with everything that went with that. So absolutely gutted with the death of Andrew Weatherall the other week, who was one of my heroes. And I've spent
really?
a few amazing nights with him spinning these wheels of steel. But with things like that, there's also always consequences. And after I came out of that world, I had all cycled before. I had been this fat kid who jumped on a bike and ended up reasonably average, but had the joy of going on training camps with the likes of Chris Hoy back in the day and stuff like that. But then I found myself in the underground clubbing world. And after that, I thought, I need to get fit again. Jumped on the bike, started riding, but I can't go around a corner. So the natural thing to do when you can't go around a corner on a bike is to come to triathlon. So that was just before probably 1995, 1996, something like that. And I did a few Ironmen. So longest day, remember the longest day?
I do indeed, yes. I was one of the few people who completed the last longest day.
Yeah,
so yeah. What was that, 2006 it would have been, I think, the last one they ran?
Oh, I can't remember. But it was after the longest day. And I was really proud. I had done 10:29, and no one in my club believed I had done 10:29. It was before the days when over 1 million people had done an Ironman, and you were kind of some sort of legend if you actually had done one. And then I came along to a training session a few weeks after, and there was this new guy. He was the national coach in Scotland there, a guy called Darren Smith. So Coach Lisa Norden, Jodie Stimson, people like that. So wonderful coach. Said, Darren, what should I do with my stroke? And he said something along the lines of, get out the swimming pool, you're rubbish. But from that time, I built a bit of a relationship with Darren. I said, well, I want to become a coach. And Darren's just an expert at finding people out very quickly. And he said, tell me what you know. And like many people, because I had done a few races, I thought I knew lots because I read a lot as well. And he just started asking searching questions. And mate, you're not ready. How about going to university? Learning the trade. If you want to be a professional coach, you need to learn your trade first. And that's what happened. I packed in my boring job in a bank within about 4 weeks of that conversation and went and studied sports science and coaching at Manchester Met. So that would have been, in fact, 2003 I did that, or 2002. And that started a journey into coaching. So from my undergrad, I went in to do a PhD in exercise physiology. So lots of lab work. Following that, I joined the Scottish Institute of Sport as a sports physiologist and worked across a number of programs from cycling to rugby to curling, working with developmental athletes through to those who were targeting Olympic podium. So that gave me very rich experiences of multiple sports, not just triathlon. And from there, I moved to British Cycling and worked in coach education and development for 6 or 7 years. which it really started off when we were in the pits of the Velodrome in Manchester. So we had this little broom cupboard. And I actually remember on my first day, or the first day cycling, in which would have been my second day, I went for a shower, and I'm standing there naked with Chris Boardman standing next to me, speaking away to Chris Boardman, which is quite an experience. It's kind of, don't stand there with your mouth wide open staring at Chris Boardman, because we're both naked. So that was some journey going with British cycling, from us working in a broom cupboard to being a multi-million-pound industry and one of the most successful governing bodies in the history of sport, in fact. But also not having a front row seat of everything that went on, but a pretty good insight into sport at every level, from how policy at government affects what happens at the coalface, through to how coaches interact with their athletes at the very highest level of the sport. And developed friendships with some wonderful people, academy coaches, through to Heiko Salzwedel, who worked with Bradley Wiggins and others over the years. So becoming pretty close to people like that and getting an insight into how their minds work. But through that journey came to an end in which I really wanted away. Some of the stories about British cycling are true. I'll be careful what I say, but there were some challenges there, some real challenges. And I eventually managed to get back into academia. And now I've got a pretty wonderful job at the University of Stirling as a lecturer in sports coaching. And I work with primarily master's level students who are professional coaches. They're typically full-time coaches working in football academies, national coaches of a variety of sports, through to people running community programs as well. So I would say I'm really a coach of the coaches. Really fundamental to that is that they find me credible, though. So I do my own coaching. One of the reasons you probably invited me on here is that Coach Simone Mitchell, who won Ironman Wales last year. So yeah, I walk the walk, and I hopefully talk the talk as well.
Yeah, do you know, it's interesting that Simone recommended. She said, you really should get Andy on and have him on as an interview. He'd make a fascinating subject for an interview on the podcast after the last time I talked to her. And it was obvious I don't think affection is too strong a word that she talked about you, the effect that you and your relationship had on her as an athlete and her athlete development. That obviously came across talking to Simone, and the fact that sometimes you get the sense that a good athlete could be coached by anybody and they would do well. And sometimes you get the sense that the relationship between coach and athlete is absolutely pivotal and fundamental to their success. And I've got no evidence to base this on, which will probably help. You probably hate as an academic, but that was my feeling talking to her.
No, I'm going to interrupt you, Rob. I'm not an academic. I would call myself a pracademic. So a practical academic.
Okay.
So there's lots of things in the world that I operate within. There's a reason that I don't use my title very often, is that it sets a picture of people think, he's an academic, so he'll think in this particular way. Or he's a sports scientist, so he'll use these methods. That's just not me. I'm a problem solver.
Yeah.
And I'll use evidence to solve problems, and I'm really rigorous in that approach. But traditional academic, I actually struggle in that world sometimes because I challenge the world a lot.
Well, I was going to say, I actually wrote a little quote down from your website. Your website is Kirkland Coaching. And what was that quote I wrote down? It was from the Dalai Lama, right? Which I love immediately. The fact that your headline quote is from the Dalai Lama. It says, know the rules well so you can break them effectively. A balance between practical experience and formal qualifications has helped me reach the stage where I know the rules and I know when to stick to them and also when to try to innovate by breaking them effectively. And that's the thing that always stuck out about me from working with you those years ago, was that you did sort of buck the trend of exactly that. You were the opposite of what I expected you to be, because I'd formed a preconceived notion of an academic doing things by the book. So I know some of the things you've told me off the record about the way you've coached people does completely go against what I expected. The fact that, you know, you're not necessarily a person who tests athletes in a laboratory setting in scientific ways, but uses much more intuitive means to try and get the best out of them, which I find really fascinating from someone who, you know, spent a lot of years learning how to do science and then ignore science when it suits them. I think that's great.
Well, that's really important, and part of what I do as well, I write for my professional body. So we've got a little professional journal, and I'm writing and challenging the status quo in the sports science world. And part of the reason for that is that I've spent a lot of time in a laboratory environment. So I've performed more VO2 max tests than I could shake a stick at. I've performed more lactate profile tests than goodness knows what. And I've gone into a high performance environment and used those tools too. But if I'm honest with myself, could I say I have really made a difference by using these methods to someone's performance? Has it changed the way they've trained? Has it made how they train more effective? And hand on heart, I can't honestly say that I've been able to make a difference with those tools. Now, again, I've got to be careful with client confidentiality, but I'm sure Dave Clamp won't mind. So someone from your part of the world did a bit of work with Deca Dave.
Yeah.
Deca Dave, who's a remarkable guy. And he was actually the last person I took to a lab. So took him to Loughborough to work with the guys at GSSI. If I'm honest, though, I took Dave there to make him feel special, to make him believe that he was getting the best support the world had available, and took him to see two of the best physiologists in the world to make him feel important. Dave, if you're listening, I didn't actually spend too much time reading the report afterwards. It was because there was another purpose of using that environment, and it was to actually demonstrate that you are important, and it's given that belief that you are important and have a right to be on that stage to perform with other people. So that's the last time I actually had someone in a laboratory environment.
That's interesting. So it seems to me that you really use the sort of the psychological element of coaching much more these days than the physiological element. It's almost as though the physiological element is a given, and you can make changes to an athlete's physiology with various applications of training stress, if you like. But it seems to me that you're saying that the psychology of the athlete is just as, if not more important to their performance than just the training that they do. It's almost the belief in the training that they do is as important as the training that they do.
This is where I'm going to get a little bit academic on you and use some big words. So I use a biopsychosocial framework to understand performance. So biological come physiological. So you've got an engine. We've got behavioral aspect, and we've got the social aspect. So the environment people train, who they interact with, and so on. They are not separate. So if we brought that back to, if I was having a chat with Plato rather than Rob Wilby, for example, we would still be talking about the same thing, how the body, mind, and soul or spirit interact with each other. Plato's probably talked about these things. And they're not separate. They're just not separate. They interact in a complex way. So we can't separate the physiology from the psychology, from the environment in which they occur. And that makes coaching and training really messy and almost theoretical. So we can't assign a method or a particular way of training because it's a complex world that we work in. And I think the skill of really good coaches is understanding or appreciating those interactions. With the science side, I don't necessarily, well, I've written the book on training with power for British Cycling, delivered courses and stuff on that. But what's really important is the fundamental understanding of the physiology that's going on behind that. The recognition that much of our understanding of that physiology comes from a laboratory environment in which the force application patterns on the pedals are different. Then we've got the oxygen uptake kinetic response, that's getting all geeky, which underpins aerobic and anaerobic metabolism. Now, what that tells us is, if we look at riding any bike course, you're up and down hills, you've got the wind, everything like that. So you're never at a steady state. But a lot of the knowledge we've got about training comes from that laboratory environment. So what I say, out in the real world, you can't separate aerobic training from anaerobic training. Both include components of each, so that I'm not too worried about having a slightly messy training program, which you'll never catch me on pool deck saying this is a lactate threshold session, or saying, oh, right, we're going to develop this component of physiological performance out in the field, because that's nonsense. The body and mind don't interact in that way. It's a loose framework, which means that training can be flexible. It doesn't necessarily have to be absolutely precise, because the behavior, that precision, and saying to an athlete, oh, you must stick to this particular power or this particular pace, can be really problematic for some, especially if they're fatigued. They think, oh, I've still got to do this session. Coach wants me to stick to 4:10 pace for a kilometre, and they're continually looking at the GPS. What I encourage athletes to do is not to look at their GPS, although I want to see the data from it, because that's my eyes and ears. It's to listen to what their head's telling them, what their legs are telling them, how they're feeling that day. And I know from my own training, if I don't look at my GPS on, say, my run on the cycle path, I can get my pace plus minus about 3 seconds on target pace, not looking at my wrist. If I look at my wrist, the error is much greater. So my mind is actually a better tool than any technology, because it tells me how I'm feeling that day, if I'm a bit fatigued, if I'm working with a female athlete and it's a particular time in the menstrual cycle and they're not really feeling up to it. I want them to feel that. I want them to think about that and moderate their effort in relation to that. And tools and technology actually make that more difficult. They present noise in allowing athletes to listen to their body. So but I still want to see that data as a coach because it's my eyes and ears. So I don't say, oh, don't use your power meter or don't take pace, because I need to see it.
Yeah.
But it's a real loose way of coaching. Some would say unprecise, but there's a deep philosophical underpinning behind why I work that way.
Yeah, it's the interplay of that the physiological data for you and the psychological data of the athlete. That's really interesting. So talk to us a little bit about working with Simone then. Obviously, she burst onto the scene in most people's knowledge over the last year with her. She had a great win at Outlaw where she pretty much, I think, decimated the field is a strong phrase, but in this case, I think she was 4th overall, wasn't she, even amongst the men? And she was just imperious that day on that course. She looked like another species running through. She passed by me like she had rollerblades on her feet. And then obviously she went on to Ironman Wales and surprised everybody on the world stage by taking the win ahead of athletes such as Lucy Gossett.
She didn't surprise everyone, Rob.
Not everybody, yeah.
There was a lot of planning behind that.
So tell us how you ended up working with Simone then, and give us some insight into her training and where you think she can go.
Right, so there's going to be one caveat here, Rob. So speaking to you about, say, my partner Rosemary, obviously being recorded, I wouldn't be completely frank. It's like speaking about your wife. You don't tell the whole world about everything. So you will primarily get the good bits. Just for the listeners as well. So I'll present a good picture because if warts and all come out, I'll be getting it in the neck afterwards.
Yeah, and she could crush you, let's be honest.
Oh, she could crush me. You see her in the gym, it's just...
She is in amazing shape, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's probably one of the most vulnerable I've ever been. I was in their gym down in Winchester, so they've got a gym in the house. And I said, well, Simone, I'm rubbish at these things. I'm getting old now, so I'm injured. Can you take me through some of these exercises? And she was amazing. So patient and everything. But she's killing herself laughing at how crap her coach was doing these exercises. She's shaking her head but still smiling. So how did I meet Simone? It's a weird one, actually. I was going up to race Aberfeldy myself. So the 70.3, best, arguably the best race in the UK. I love it. Beautiful course. So I was going up there to do that event, and I got such a considered email. It just came through giving me a bit about background of someone that I had never heard of. And saying, can we speak? And it was very articulate and really considered. Simone was looking for a coach, and she had gone to my friend Simon, so Professor Simon Jobson at Winchester University, who I know from the cycling world. And he had said, well, have a chat with Andy. So Simone and I got talking, and what was amazing and what made me say, I want to work with this girl, is that she interviewed me. She drilled me. She said, why should I put my faith in you as a coach? You've not really got that much of a track record, have you? So why should I put my hands and my faith in you? And that was so refreshing. I don't like when athletes ask me to coach them and then say, right, I'll give you this much money. No, I want to know about why they want me, opposed to Rob Wilby or anyone else. It's, why have you picked me? Why do you think I'm the right fit? And if they've not got that conceptualization, it's right, either jog on or come back with some decent questions and interview me and find out why I'm the best fit for you. So that's what she did. And what was that, 4 years ago, four and a half years ago, something like that. And the first thing we did was develop a 4-year plan. And we've basically implemented every single bit of that plan on a very, very rocky path along the way with some, well, in Simone's last chat with you, she talked about her navicular injury, which was really serious. So just basically over the years, we've developed a stronger and stronger relationship in which we've gone on this journey, which we're just really getting to the beginning of that journey. That it's been a tough graft for especially Simone. It's been tough for her. She's worked incredibly hard. There's been some big barriers, some big setbacks along the way. And the result of that journey was what the world saw in Wales last year.
So the performance that she put together in Wales, I called up the results earlier on because I wanted to remind myself. I think she went 9 hours 41 overall, didn't she? She broke the course record on a course that's generally rated as being about an hour slower than the given fast courses out there. So pretty much a world-class performance on any course, given that she's a very good swimmer, incredibly strong biker, and backed us up with a 3:10 marathon on that rolling course down in Wales. I think one of the challenges with comparing that performance with sort of the rest of the field, the top 10 in Kona, and I think that's the kind of standard of athlete that she is not very many of them have been over and raced the Wales course. So it's hard to kind of get a where do you stack up kind of feeling. And I know she's going out to race Roth this year, isn't she?
Yep.
So she'll be out racing Roth, and pretty much that's the who's who of both men's and women's triathlon this summer. Are you intrigued as to how that's going to play out on race day?
Absolutely intrigued. Nervous, probably feeling sick about talking about it. Not as sick as I felt on Wales, though, because that was a big day.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely intrigued. But when it comes down to it, if Simone performs in the way she knows she can perform, goes through all the processes, and executes her best race, then that's all we can ask for. I'm not just being that sit on the fence, let's I'll focus on the process and stuff, because the very best athletes in the world don't do that. They're both process and outcome focused. So we can't get away from that. We do talk about results as well. We do talk about other athletes, but it's not the focus. It's the process of building up to be able to perform at Simone's very best. So yes, I am intrigued. It would be nice to see, but I've absolutely got every faith in Simone's ability to perform at a very high level. I think she'll demonstrate that. She's exceptional at executing on the day like no one I've ever seen. She's just scary in the run-up. She is scary. It's kind of difficult to engage, but she's got that sheer determination, the focus at a level I've genuinely never seen in any athlete before, bearing in mind I know Chris Hoy and others.
Wow, really? On a level like that, huh?
Well, it's different. Everyone's got their own way of dealing with things, but in terms of how she executes, in terms of how she focuses, in terms of her mindset, she's up there with any athlete that I've come across anywhere at any time. So whether only time will tell. We don't know how far she can go. It's impossible to tell until we come up against the very best in the world. And we'll see. And regardless, and I think this was, I'm trying to remember what race it was, whether it was Aix-en-Provence or Chattanooga when she won the 70.3 Worlds. But Simone said that this meant the world to her. I said, Simone, I really don't care your result of this. I still care about you. I want you to perform your best, but I'll still be there at the end, supporting you regardless of what happens. So yes, it's nice for my ego for her to do well. It's nice for her to do really well. But those moments pass. As soon as you're over the finishing line, there'll be probably a couple of days of celebrating, fun, media, all these types of things. But then it's back to normal life, where there's sometimes a really big void when that's over, and it almost feels empty after having that really big high. So any athlete I work with has got to know that when that void comes, because it invariably does, whether you're multiple Olympic champion or win your local age group race, you need to know that people love you, that people care about you, and they're watching your back regardless of the outcome. So that's what's important to me.
Yeah, and let's go back to your time with British Cycling on that same sort of level, because obviously you're very driven at British Cycling by the 4-year cycle of Olympics. You must have seen that cycle go through, I think you said you were there 11 years. Was it something like that?
No, it was nearly 7.
7 years.
7 years.
So you must have seen that cycle go through a couple of times in terms of Olympic cycles, with athletes building up to this 4-year cycle kind of goal, and then you either get there or you don't, and it passes or it doesn't. What do you think was one of the main strengths of the British cycling system in terms of the amount of success that they had winning gold medals at the Olympics? Was a lot of that down to the coaching and the systems that they had in place there, or do you feel it was achieved almost despite that?
Yes. The answer to most questions is it depends. And we talk about the Dave Brailsfords of the world, Shane Sutton, Steve Peters. But what many people don't see are the academy coaches, people like my friend Monica Eden, who lives down near you as well, the Tim Buckles of the world, who led up the academy program, Simon Watts, the mountain bike coach. What wonderful, committed and driven coaches they are. So if you look at the history of British cycling, it's people like Tim Buckle, who ran the academy program, who's going into the Go Ride clubs, who's bringing people through that system and putting them on a plate. I'm talking about people like Geraint Thomas and others, putting people like that on a plate for the big names to do the rest. So they're really the unsung heroes for me, that the general public doesn't see the actual impact these really wonderful people have. And they're still doing a great job. One of the strengths, I think, for a period anyway, was the balance. There was a balance between Dave, Shane, and Steve, in that there was a number of big egos in there, very driven people, but they balanced each other out. And when that balance was broken, we kind of know the rest.
Yeah.
Also, we're very quick to celebrate the successes, and that environment works for some people some of the time. For particularly the female athletes, but there is a gender component, but for some of the guys too, some didn't want evaluated by the numbers. They just wanted the coach to put their arm around them and say, "How are you, mate? How's your day been?" And again, there's that locker room omerta. But I saw one thing that I was speaking to an Olympic champion, in fact, and we were speaking about coffee. I probably know more about coffee than I do about sport, as do many cyclists. So I was speaking to this guy, and a particular coach came in and said, basically, has that got to do with winning Olympic medals? And I was just dumbfounded. It was kind of, come on, mate. These guys can't go out for a beer. They'll go out to a coffee shop and hang out in a coffee shop. That's their release. That's their social side. So it's really important. So we know from the press that people like Chris Hoy and others haven't got a bad word to say about the system. And probably quite rightly, because it worked for them. Yeah. But those who spoke out in the press and bullying cultures and such, some of the para-athletes, in fact, some of the mountain bike guys as well, were they hard done by? Of course they were. They didn't fit into that system. And where we'll come back to the beginning of the story with Darren Smith. So Darren basically takes athletes, or took athletes who hadn't prospered in systems, who are quirky athletes, who challenge, or characters like me, basically, that you can't put us in a box. You can't tell us how to be as human beings because we'll not respond well to it. But it'll break us. It will. If you try and control us, it breaks us. If someone tries to control the way I think or tells me to work in a particular way, the beasts inside my head come out and I crack. So Darren took in athletes like that who are performing at a very high level, but not a world-beaten level, and helped them perform above what the system would allow them to perform in. So it's recognizing that people are different. They've got different needs, different requirements from a coach. And we must also always be mindful of the consequences for those who are not quite hitting the mark. So we talked about a particular coach earlier before we came on air, and their successes at a very high level. What the public doesn't hear, and what you might hear, but what I definitely hear, and sometimes what we do is pick up the pieces of the people that have been shot out of those systems, who are broken psychologically. And it's people like you and me that need to build them up again. And that's the side of the sports world that doesn't really get covered in the press, the consequences for those that don't fit into a particular system and what it does to them. It's not pretty some of the time.
Something that always really appealed to me working with, I chose to work with working age groupers rather than the elite world, was I think it was largely down to that understanding of it isn't always about necessarily winning. The satisfaction I got from working with people rarely seemed to be, with the young national champions in the school and things like that. It seemed to be no matter what level they got to, they had to get to the next level in order to satisfy that hunger within them that said, there's got to be something else. I have to reach for the next thing. And now I need to win. I win the towns, I've got to win the counties. I win the counties, I need to win the nationals. I win the nationals, I've got to go to the VSEC games. And the thing I really enjoy about working with age groupers is we're not dealing with winning. We're dealing with people becoming a better version of themselves and achieving things that they perhaps don't believe that they can achieve. And the satisfaction they get from that in completing the first Ironman, or even getting faster in an Ironman or a half Ironman, seems to be, it's so much more human than, I got to the point where I kind of looked at it and went, would I want my 8-year-old son to go into the Olympic system in order to in order to go on to try and win an Olympic gold medal. And that's not where it's at for me. And I can only speak for me, but I recognize, and you'll have heard a lot more stories than me, but I recognize the things that are necessary in order to win and win and win and win and win and get to that top of the very pinnacle. That's not always something that sits that well with what we might consider to be a happy, fulfilled, rounded life. And, as a kid I grew up very driven to try and win stuff through my own unique challenges and mental demons. I got to the point where I've gone, do you know what? Maybe, just maybe, being a happy and well-rounded person is more important than that gold medal.
I hear you, but I genuinely don't care what level someone works at. Yeah, I've got a really busy life. I'm an academic, a lecturer. I'm doing research. I'm teaching lots of people. My life is busy, so I've got to prioritize my time. And I'm probably at that stage of my career that I've got over the imposter syndrome. And when you were there the day I got over my imposter syndrome, would you believe, the Training Peaks Endurance Coaching Summit.
Okay.
And it was actually on the final thing that I found myself on the stage with Stephen Sealer and Joe Friel and Dirk Friel and all these people. And then people are getting selfies with me afterwards. And I was kind of, what am I doing? The initial thing is, well, why have I been invited up on the stage with these world leaders at what they do? Well, I've just sat down with Joe Friel and kind of had a deep and meaningful discussion about training stress score and saying, Joe, I don't think you quite get it, mate. Come on. And trying to pull him up. And then it's, actually, I'm having discussions and challenging people like that. I'm at that level. So got over that imposter syndrome. But fundamentally in my research, which is in mental health now, mental health of athletes, is based on the same thing. I won't talk too much about it, but it's about developing healthy environments in which people prosper.
Yeah.
That can, so that they can achieve their potential. Now, whether that is an Olympic champion, an age grouper, or a 3-year-old child, the factors are exactly the same. So I would say that probably one of the most valuable experiences for me as a coach was being a swimming teacher and teaching 3- and 4-year-olds how to swim. And I think many performance coaches would do pretty well to get in that environment in their little budgie smugglers or whatever, and see how children in an environment that they're scared of. So it's not human nature to want to put your head under the water. We're not designed to have our heads under the water, to put the face in the water. So taking young people through their first experience of putting their face in the water where they're scared means that extreme emotions which they've not quite learnt to regulate come out. Then you're seeing how they develop skills and techniques. So seeing a 3-year-old becoming a 4-year-old, becoming a 5-year-old in a swimming pool, and seeing how the panics, the emotions, how they change and they eventually get comfortable. And then what happens is you see a stroke going from sitting on a little rubber ring to one that actually looks like swimming. And that's absolutely no different to taking an age grouper, whether it's that middle-aged lady who decides they want to do the sprint in an open water environment through to an age grouper that wants to get to Kona, but getting in that water in the sea for the first time, you're seeing the same emotions. The only difference is they've got ego and they try and regulate those emotions more. they try to hide them from you. So that understanding how a 3 or 4-year-old behaves, you can almost see the natural tendencies of the age groupers going, this water's freezing. I'm not getting in there. I laugh because you know at the beginning of a race, for me, it's 16, 17, 18 degrees, and they're going, oh, it's freezing. I can't put my head in that. And you hear all those fears at the start of the race coming out from the age groupers, panicking in that environment. And I'm thinking, well, I'll go down Portobello near Edinburgh and jump in the sea when it's 4 degrees. And that's fun. That's fun for me. But that's taken time to regulate the emotions so that you can go in there. So coming into a race, I've not got those fears. I'm actually thinking, bring it on. I like this environment. I'm not worried about the cold. I've not got the same emotions as 90% of the field. So that I can, when I'm swimming well, I'm lapping off 135 per 100 or something like that. Yet in really challenging swimming conditions, I'm at the top part of the field just because I like it. So that recognizing these emotions, behaviors in others, how they react to different environments, means that you can coach them to be better in that environment.
Yeah.
And you don't get that from functional threshold power. You get it through being that little worm that gets inside the head of other people and recognizing what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what their beliefs are, what their knowledge is, where their knowledge has come from, and whether that knowledge has got basis in truth or not.
Yeah.
So
that's absolutely interesting, mate. And it brings us around to what you wanted to talk about at the start of the show. Your trip to Kenya recently, where you've been talking about developing systems for helping mental health. Will you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I've just had an amazing journey. So to Nairobi and then up to Eldoret and Iten, where it's kind of this.
It's the promised land, isn't it, for distance runners?
Oh, it just is, and it really is. So there's the source of champions, the town of champions, the city of champions, but all within that county. And that's a really exciting project. So if you're interested in endurance sport, where better to go to than somewhere like Eldoret or Eton? But what we also know is that the careers of Kenyan runners tend not to be that long. We're hearing about doping, we're hearing about suicide attempts, really, really short careers. But these guys are so important to the social and economic development of the area. So something I just found out the other day was that athletes own probably about half of the city of Eldoret through money. Yeah, through money they've brought to the area, so that it makes them very, very important politically, socially, and economically. So they're key role models in that environment. But they're also suffering. They're not, a lot of them, whilst they can go out and run a sub 2:10 marathon or whatever without being too much out of puff. What's happening after that? What happens when they come to Europe? What happens when they earn $100,000 from winning a race? How able are they to be able to deal with companies like Nike and negotiate contracts? How able are they to say no to some doctor from Italy who's suggesting that they take this little bit of liquid that'll guarantee that they'll run faster? So I really want to better understand that environment and how we can support the wider communities around Eldoret and Eton, which is primarily a third world part of the country. Poverty like I've never seen
Oh, it's
before.
unbelievable, isn't it? I was going to say I went out to Nairobi about 10 years ago, and the drive from the airport will stay with me for the rest of my life. The fact that the extreme levels of poverty that people live in, and yet I was staying in one of these fancy 5-star hotels and was invited to go out for a run with some other locals who literally lived in tin shacks across the road from this 5-star hotel. There must have been 100 guys out running at 5 o'clock in the morning, none of which I could keep up with. And you realize that the breadth and depth of talent out there, you know, they sort of brought me out and said, here's a guy, he's a runner from England. How fast have you done a marathon? And I very proudly told them about my 2:58. And they were openly trying not to laugh in my face. Yeah. One of the guys said, you know, we don't mean to be rude, but my sister's just had a 4th child and she just had a go at the local marathon, and she was faster than you and she hadn't done any training. And so it was like the gulf between, you know, the Western tourist and the locals was immense.
It was really funny. So I'm doing a bit of work with a chap called Paul Ochieng at Strathmore University over there. And I'm saying, well, Eldoret half marathons on when I'm there. So I think I'll probably
see this coming.
I'll probably do it, Paul. And he starts laughing. He's, mate, what do you think you'll do it in? And I said, well, I was injured last year and my big toe hurts and stuff like that. So if I'm at the top of my form, I might go 135. And he's, listen, it's 2,300 meters. You're not going to do that. And secondly, and he burst out laughing, saying, everyone's going to be in their bed after having a 3-course lunch by the time you finish. And he said, don't bother. You'll just make a fool of yourself. But what was fascinating there, I was with a guy, he was actually my driver, which was quite embarrassing, to be honest, a guy called Fatwell Kiamayo. And Fatwell was the 1974 Commonwealth Games champion at 110 meters hurdles.
Wow.
And still holds the Kenyan record. And Fatwell's your typical, how would I describe that coach that kind of does everything. So he brings up young people. He goes around primary schools and spotting talent. And some of the talent he spotted is absolutely incredible. So he kind of coaches in a non-structured way that just not gone through a coach education pathway. It's not that he's not educated, he's just not done that. So spending the day in a car with someone like him and chatting about his experiences and talking about, well, he said, yeah, we could rule the world at sprint events, middle distance as well, but there's not as much money in it, so people focus on the endurance. And then we're down on this field in Eton, so just down from St Patrick's School, where Brother Combe, the famous coach, is from. And I'm watching coaching practice and that I've never seen before. The range of motion in the hips of the athletes was remarkable. Their rhythm, their poise, absolutely incredible. Going through their drills, particular drills that, well, I've seen a guy called Timo Limo do them on YouTube, but things you don't see down in Manchester or Knutsford, different ways of doing things. It was amazing in speaking to the coaches there. And what struck me with the coaches was how educated they were, how much rigor they went through in understanding what they were doing in coaching. The plyometrics work that, well, there was 30 guys there who were all world class doing all those plyometric exercises in a drilled form. And it was absolutely fascinating, things I've never seen before. And then And I've got to be very careful in what I say here. I went up to Lorna Kiplagat's place, which is the high altitude endurance center, and I spoke with a few people there, Mzungus, white people, and they
Right.
they were there just basically doing what they do in Europe, but getting the ergogenic effect from being at altitude. And here's me out mixing it with the locals, learning so much, and then we've got a bunch of Europeans doing what they do in Europe. That's really tightly controlled, constrained, rather than thinking, well, who have we got here? We've got some of the best runners in the world, so let's get energy from each other. Let's give positive energy to each other. We're on a field covered in goats, but most people can run under 220 on that field, including the goats because they live at altitude too. And then there's the hill that takes you down into the Rift Valley that they'll do specific training runs up there. So is it highly structured training in the way that we would conceptualize it? Probably not. But does the same intellectual rigor go into conceptualizing how these guys train? Of course it does. So, I was learning innovative practice that works, and then reflecting back on what I see in what we would call more developed world with greater resources and everything, and seeing people constrained, not able to achieve their potential because they're losing focus of what's really important.
Wow. It sounds like it was a fascinating trip on lots of different levels, both in terms of being able to be around these, incredible athletes, but also just a shift of mindset of what actually goes into training. And I really like that you take that stuff in.
Well, yeah, and I don't know what the word in Swahili is, but in Bantu, so South African, they talk about, is it Ubuntu? So it's like this connection between people.
Okay.
That you're not separate from your community. You're all part of that community. And this was really moving as well. So I was having a meeting with an academic from Moy University, and we were talking about academic things like curriculum structures and research outputs, because that's what academics do. And then he said, I've got someone that I think you might want to speak to. I'll see if I can arrange it. So he picked up the phone, dialed it, and it was, hello, Patrick, are you free? It's, I've got someone I want you to meet. And it's, yeah, I'm here in Eldoret. Meet you up at the posh hotel. It was Patrick Sang, Elliot Kipchoge's coach. So here's me sitting in this posh hotel in Eldoret, getting 2 or 3 hours of Kipchoge's coach and chewing the fat with this guy and seeing the intellectual rigor and what he was doing, and then how he was research informed. He's sort right. So Andy, you need to take an anthropological approach in your research because we've got this cross-generational difference in how different athletes are able to cope with the challenges of the environment. So I spent time with Mike Boyd as well. Do you remember that name?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
So I spent a couple of days with Mike Boyd, who was one of the early
he raced Ovet and Co and those boys back in the day, didn't he?
Yeah. So 8 and 1500.
Yeah.
And he won bronze in Munich in 1972.
That's right, yeah.
So spending a couple of days with Mike in his house, and I'm just showing me pictures of his mum and dad on the mantelpiece, saying you start to get an appreciation of what makes people like Mike tick. Now, most of his family have gone on to study in Ivy League universities and are really important in what they do now. And his parents were subsistence farmers who hadn't had an education, and Mike got that chance. He started an education, and then he actually met a Scotsman. It often happens. He met a great Scotsman who encouraged him to run more, and before you know it, he's winning Commonwealth and Olympic medals and so on. So that understanding his journey and how his journey differs to, say, Eliud Kipchoge's, how Kipchoge's journey differs to athletes that are just coming through the ranks now. This is what Patrick was saying to me, is that you need to understand all those perspectives, also the different tribes within Kalenjin, how the cultural differences affect how people are absolutely driven to do what they do. And he said these drives are changing over time, so you need to gain appreciation of that. So to speak to another coach who's not an academic, saying this is how you need to perform your research and doing it with such rigor, saying, oh, I know why you're Kipchoge's coach. And very similar with Bernard Uma. I spent some time with Bernard Uma, who's Timothy Chariot and Menangoy's coach. Exactly the same. So what I'm actually seeing, and we're talking about coaching here, what I'm seeing is the people I met over there, okay, they were exceptional, but even coming down the path, the intellectual rigor and the understanding of training and coaching of the Kenyan coaches was in some regards higher than what I see in the UK. The intellectual rigor, the balance, the understanding of societal influences on performance were very, very prominent. But their systems of developing coaches aren't really there, yet they're still at the same or a higher level than I would say we are in the UK. So exciting to see that.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, listen, that seems like a good place to wrap this up. It's been great chatting with you. I've got a lot from this conversation. So thank you very much for your time, man.
No, it's been a pleasure. I hope I've not wittered on too much and talked about esoteric things that the listeners don't want to hear about. So
I think it'll have been very interesting for everybody, mate. And I look forward to having you on again in the future when we can hear all about Simone's races in Roth and in Kona, and get a bit of the inside scoop there as well. Hey,
cool. Cheers, mate. Cheers.
Thank you.
See you later. Bye.
All right, so that just about brings us to the end of this week's show. I hope all is well with you. I hope all is well with your families. I hope all is well and you're managing to get yourselves out and get some exercise in nature. It's changing times at the moment, and who knows? I've certainly had a moment today where a Facebook memory popped up for me of a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. I was up climbing the Old Man of Coniston. So that's like 3 years ago today, I think it was. And I had a real pang in my heart of, my God, what would I give to be able to drive to the Lake District right now and go and climb a mountain? One of those you don't know what you miss until you can't have it kind of things. So while you're still able to get yourself out for a run outdoors, get out and enjoy running around, because who knows, it might change, and it might change for a while. So make the most of every moment and every opportunity that you have. I wish all the best for you and your families. And yeah, let's hope we all get ourselves through this. See if you can help somebody else out today. All right, so remember, there's links in the show notes for all of our sponsors. It's the code OxygenAddict15 at precisionhydration.com. And it is athleticgreens.com/OxygenAddict. You can also use the code OxygenAddict50 at thriver.co to get 50% off your first test if you want to do a home blood test. And come and join us on the Oxygen Addict podcast Zwift Power Hour, Tuesdays, 7:15 p.m. UK time. You can just find it in the events list on Zwift if you're a Zwifter. And if you're not, get on it. It really will add something to your day if you're stuck and stranded in your own apartment or house at the moment. Okay, so there's links in the show notes for all these sponsors, so you don't have to remember them. And until next week, have a great, safe training and racing week, everybody. I'm Coach Rob Wilby, and you've been listening to the Oxygen Addict Triathlon podcast. See ya.